Hey guys, it's Khadroth again. For today's guide, we're going to cover offensive buff stacking. Now, I think this is a concept that a lot of you guys kind of understand at a decent level, but this is something that if you guys actually take the time to learn a little bit more about, it'll help you make better overall choices. It'll help you tailor your team comps better, figure out which mystic code to use in the right situation or the right craft essence to use on the right unit. So this is something that I think can be really important for you guys, even if you don't understand the hard math behind it. As long as you understand the relationships at play between the buffs, you'll be able to make better choices. So what do I mean when I say offensive buff stacking? I mean the stacking of any sorts of offensive buffs with another type of buff. That can be stuff like having a craft essence equipped that gives you a buff. That can be stuff like buffing another unit with a support skill or something like that. Any other type of skill that affects anything, using your mystic code on someone, all of that. It's important to understand the interactions at play here. You don't have to know the basic math as much as you understand the interaction and what that means. So there's two types of interactions, and one is additive and the other is multiplicative. In just about every circumstance, multiplicative is better. Why? What does that mean? So the important thing to understand about additive and multiplicative buffs is that buffs of the same type are going to be additive with each other. Buffs of a different type are going to be multiplicative with each other. And the example that I can show you here is right here on screen. If you have two 50% buffs, for instance, dealing with them additively, meaning that they're of the same type, means that you're only going to get a 100% modifier. Whereas if they're of a different type, they're multiplicative with each other, they multiply each other, then you're getting 1.5 times 1.5, and now it's even stronger than the sum of its parts. So instead it becomes 1.25 or 125%. This is an important thing to understand, that the multiplicative scaling here is obviously always going to be preferred. It will allow everything to be force magnified and become stronger than just the simple addition that you have with an additive relationship. Now, how we translate that, and to give you guys a good example, you don't need to know the nitty-gritty math behind it, you just need to understand how the buffs interact with each other. That is to say, if we're talking about, say, a Scotty loop, well, it's like, okay, now you've got card type up buffs right here, and you've also got defense downs that are going to be in the party. So how are these going to interact? Well, the simple answer is, and even including Atalanta's quick up here, all the quick ups are additive with each other, versus the defense downs are actually going to be multiplicative with that. So this is an important thing. But then my question that I would pose to you guys to think about throughout this video is, what should the mystic code be that I'm going to use here? On the screen, you guys are going to see another graphic from my friend, Mr. BobMosses. As you guys can see here, it is very simple, very down and dirty, but the important thing to take away is that there's about 4 to 5 types of different buffs and how they interact. And you'll see what I mean when I say 4 to 5. Essentially, let's start here at the beginning with the attack up and defense down. This is actually pretty much the most common type of buff in the game. Most units in the game tend to provide some sort of attack up for themselves, or a charisma for the party, or a defense down on the enemy, or something like that. So this is a very common type of buff to encounter, and thus it's probably the least likely to be one that you want to go with when you're trying to look at expanding the damage capabilities of your comp. It will often be your most common and easy solution to add damage, but probably not the best scaling of the ones you can add due to how many comps already have it in it. Now for the next one, we also have the type up and type resist down, and this is going to be your card buffs. Anything that is going to enhance Buster, Arts, Quick on your unit, or anything that will debilitate the enemies with resistance down to each of those card types. So these are additive in a relationship with themselves, as well as multiplicative with the attack buffs. And this is again what we're talking about, and why you need to kind of have a well-balanced group if you want to have a lot of damage with regards to the buffs they're bringing. Now for the third one, this is a pretty beefy category. This is NP and special damage types up, and we're going to talk a lot about the special damage types up, but just understand that this is a lot of things, including event bonuses, trait bonuses, and yada yada yada. But then we also have NP damage here and crit damage. All of this will stack additively with itself. Again, this is going to be a lot of buff types in the game, and I'm going to have a special little word to talk about here in a second. But the next category that you guys are going to see is going to be super effective damage. This is specific to noble phantasms right now in the game. Part of that is because the coding actually specifies noble phantasm in it. Essentially, this is going to be stuff like Gil's trait on his MP that allows him to deal extra damage to servants. That is to say, it does not affect the other cards in his turn. It instead only affects that specific noble phantasm. So it's not a duration type buff. Super effective buffs are incredibly powerful, but also incredibly limited with what they affect. But that is why they are multiplicative with every other type of buff in the game as well. Now, our last category here is a little bit of an oddity. It does kind of stack here, but it's a total damage modifier plus the flat damage. So everything else is multiplying with itself. The flat damage in and of itself is going to just add on after the fact in the end. So this is stuff like Waver's extra flat attack given on his charisma skill, the divinity trait on a servant, or adding faux paw prints, which are going to come out down the line, that basically allow you to enhance the attack of a card. It is purely flat. It is added in at the end of all other damage and is not affected by any other damage type. That's what I mean when I say divinity adds an additional, say, 150 damage. It's not going to scale with anything else, including bonuses and advantage over an enemy unit. Let's say it was a saber versus a lancer. That will not be affected in that regard because it's just flat damage. So it can help out, it can stack up, and can be useful to you, but it's not going to overall scale multiplicatively like anything else will. So let's go back to the super effective versus power modifier thing here. Every single one of these special damage types up is going to end up being a power mod. What that means is a power mod is anything that affects things for the duration of a turn, anything that is not specifically a super effective modifier. So remember the difference here. Super effective modifiers are only NPs. They're only affecting that specific MP, so they don't have a turn duration. Whereas power modifiers are anything affecting trait damage, anything lasting more than a turn, yada yada yada. There can be super effective modifiers that affect trait damage. Remember, they're specific to that MP. So that's the important difference here. The power mod has the full turn duration and thus affects more than one attack, whereas the super effective modifier can only affect the one attack and it has to be the NP. Put another way here, all event bonus damage, all turn-based trait damage, all of that is a power modifier. A great example of an NP that is a power modifier and not super effective is Jax, because Jax actually has the specific qualification of being for one turn. And this is what we mean when we say it's a power mod. Because this will affect additional cards beyond that point, it is not considered to be a super effective modifier. And the important thing here to understand about all of this is that power modifiers are much more common and grouped up with NP damage and crit damage. This is why a lot of the times when you guys get event damage bonus, you sometimes get some weird outcomes where you think adding in some additional NP damage or trying to crit meme something is going to work out for you really well, but it ends up just being additive with the other common buff types and doesn't scale that well. And instead, you'd actually get more from either having a super effective modifier or factoring in more card or attack damage that can actually stack multiplicatively with that event bonus. So this is an interesting thing to consider, and it's something you guys should look out for in particular events, particularly any sort of event where you're incentivized to do a lot of buff stacking like a raid event. Now, to answer your final little question that I posed to you guys as well, the answer is actually a trick question. Now, on Atalanta here, I have Fragment of 2004, and that is one of the best options to use on her. But if you answered Arctic Mystic Code, that's also correct. In fact, in this exact circumstance, this is just a weird scenario where both of these are just as effective as the other option. Now, we can make an argument that perhaps I should be using Fragment of 2004 for the additional NP gain on it and help me out here, but still, it just depends on where you're using it and how. So I'm going to tell you guys, you don't need to concern yourself overly much with knowing the exact numerical values for any of this. You just need to understand how the buffs interact with each other. When you understand that, you understand how to add more additional damage to the party and what's going to affect that. Again, another very interesting one to talk about is Golden Sumo, and Golden Sumo actually will stack additively with all attack up and defense downs, because while the craft essence itself has some built-in attack power from leveling it, the actual buff that the craft essence gives is purely an attack buff, and thus it is an additive stack. This is why a lot of the times we will tell you guys that while Golden Sumo is a very good CE, mathematically it still can get outpaced by quite a few other alternatives that are frankly also welfare and far more recent to have acquired. Okay, so that's all I've got to say about this one. If you guys have questions, if you need me to clarify anything, be sure to type in the comments below. Again, I really enjoyed making this one. This one was at least a shorter one, but if you guys have any sort of input as to what you'd like to see us do next, feel free to let me know. And in the meantime, guys, do understand I stream every single weeknight FGO starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can check me out on Twitch. I'll put the link in the socials section of the description, and you guys can also join the Discord if you want to become part of our community. It's a great way of getting help or again, exchanging friend codes or any sort of event guidance. So do make sure that you join the Discord, but make sure you assign a role, otherwise the server kicks you. So I'll see you guys for the next one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and good day.